Ladies and gentlemen, today is the big one because we're finally going to be answering the question that you no doubt have. Should you be buying AMD or Nvidia? This, of course, all stems from the launch of this, the RX 7900 XTX and XT. The exact one that we have here, we'll be taking a closer look at, is the 7900 XTX Asus Tuf edition, and I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot to say about this. Is this going to be worth the money? Is it good for ray tracing? Does it have all the performance that you need? And ultimately, how does it stack up against the competition? I'll be answering all of these questions and giving you some real buying advice after a short word from this video sponsor. Acer's performance laptops are perfect for powerhouse gaming. Whether it's Acer, Predator, or Concept D, there are plenty of options to land super smooth frame rates in the latest titles. For a limited time, you can even grab a month's free Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with selected purchases, giving access to over 100 PC titles at no extra charge. Get yours today with the link down below. Let us begin by taking this out of the box and delivering what I believe is probably some bad news, because I have received an email from Asus with the pricing information on this, because you're looking at £150 of price premium over the RRP. And obviously there are going to be loads of different cards at different prices, but on the XT, that makes it more expensive than the RRP of the XTX, which in my mind makes that completely pointless. But obviously recommended prices aren't actually what we're going to see, so hopefully it's nothing extortionate. Now this is interesting. This thing is massive, and in some ways that's good because it means the cooling performance of this is going to be excellent. It obviously looks great. If you have a big rig, it's going to stand tall, proud, and it's going to make it look like it costs a lot of money. And here's the thing, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the whole point of the new series of 7000 GPUs, one of the main selling points, that they were smaller? I mean, this looks nice, it fits in this rig perfectly, but if you want to put it in like a smaller system, that's going to be fine. Whereas if you grab this, have it alongside, it's just extortionate. It's bigger in every single way. And yes, it is going to run quieter and it's going to have lower thermals, but I don't really think that matters to the point where you need this much cooling. And I think what no one is really saying is that originally all of this generation was supposed to use loads and loads of power, so all of these coolers were made. I mean, this must be very similar to what you find on Nvidia's cards that still don't need this level of cooling solution. So what we've sort of ended up with is cooling solutions that are not required for the amount of power that they're going to use, but they're being sold to you anyway. And to me, that is very, very disappointing, because it means you're paying for something that you just don't really need. If you want to see why, you can find my full video in the top right corner of this screen that talks about this in much greater detail. So let's have a closer look at this thing. You have 3 fans. The middle one faces in the opposite direction, so you get this sort of vortex effect. It tends to work quite well. Along the top, big Radeon logo. Doesn't look as if we've got much RGB here. There's probably going to be a little bit, but obviously if you go for something like a Strix, you'll get more of that, even better cooling. But as I say, this is overkill, so please don't buy the Strix of this. It is not going to be required at all. If you're feeling a little bit like an overclocker, you should have better results with this over a reference edition. We'll have to test this a little bit later in the video. We have 3 8-pins here, which is nice to see, rather than like the 12 or 16 pin, whatever you want to call it, that you find on the Nvidia cards. Obviously you're going to need a lot of cabling, need to make it look neat, but I think people feel more comfortable with this, tried and tested. On the back you do have a back plate here. It's nice, you've got this cutout, so you have the classic pass-through design. You've got a performance mode and a quiet mode. I don't know anyone that ever uses the quiet mode, just tune it in software, but it's nice to have that dual switch. On the I/O, I have a feeling, and indeed I'm correct, that they have actually got rid of the USB-C here that you'll find on the reference. So you've got 3 display ports and 1 HDMI. Don't forget, all of them are 2.1, which is the latest and greatest, and will allow you to do this at like 8K, 165 Hertz with DSC, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it is definitely an attractive card. It's just one that's massive. And to put this into perspective, allow me to grab the previous generation 6800 XT. This is the same Tuf card, but I mean, look at the difference. Because I think a lot of people that are upgrading won't actually realize this until it turns up. And this was a massive card. This did not fit in an NZXT H1, or at least the original version, when it came out, which upset me. And I mean, this clearly isn't going to, is it? Next to the 7900 XT reference edition, which is very similar actually to the XTX, you can see the difference, it's huge. Here it is versus some competition. This is the 7900 XTX Red Devil from Power Color. I think the Tuf is actually a little bit bigger, but They're both pretty huge, and again, frankly, I think both pretty unnecessary. We also have the RTX 4080, which is of course its closest competitor. I mean, don't forget you're getting into 4080 money, which is kind of leaning me towards the 4080 if you're going to be paying very similar money, but the whole point is that this is supposed to be less. And then finally, we have a 3080 Ti Gigabyte Gaming X. You can see that they have come on quite a lot. Again, this was formerly a big card, but in comparison to this latest gen, there's no competition. But I think it's time to start testing this. Should we put it in our rig? We'll grab our brand new PC Centric mouse mat that you can own, linked in the description down below. If you want to hit wave 1 of this, you've got a very, very limited time, because for starters, if this isn't successful, then there won't be a wave 2. And even if there is, you're probably gonna have to wait until like April, May. So get your order in now, and you can have this lighting up your setup. Looks great, doesn't it? Link down below. We'll remove the old cards and keep this image in your mind now, because when we take this out and put the Tuf in, it's going to look a little bit different. We then line this up with our slot, give it a push home, screw it in, and then yeah, I mean, it does look good. It does look good. If you do have a larger chassis, it does not matter other than the fact that you're physically paying the money for this. I'm just concerned that not everybody has a chassis like this, and not everyone wants a chassis like this. Why does everyone need to go big these days? What's wrong with, well, going smaller? Yeah, I would say that looks very tasteful, actually. If you're after the non-bling life, or you've got something like this, where you've got some subtle RGB going throughout, it's gonna fit in nicely. It's not like the Red Devil that comes, if you get the limited edition anyway, with this like bright red backplate. It does come off though. I think the first thing you need to know about the 7900 XTX is that on both the cards I've tested so far, both of them have this coil whine, which is pretty annoying, but it is only going to happen in menus. So it wouldn't bother me enough to not buy it, but it definitely is something that you should know. Let's jump into some Battlefield gameplay, shall we? We'll have a quick look at the settings. We're running this at 4K, Ultra, and ray tracing off. And let's have a look. Straight out the gate, actually that is not bad. That is 120 FPS without any sort of DLSS action or anything going on. I admit, I didn't expect this level of FPS. I had this down as an Nvidia title, not having DLSS, so it's gonna clearly be a title that Nvidia's better at. And that may still well be true, but I guess the point is, if you can play an Nvidia title on this AMD card and not really feel like you're compromising at all, then what is the problem? Because that really is the story with this whole generation of AMD versus Nvidia. Nvidia have almost done like a bit of a walled garden thing where they don't want you to leave, they've got DLSS 3.0, better ray tracing, but obviously a higher price. And at this stage, when AMD actually has very similar levels of performance to the RTX 4080. It's going to be better in a fair few titles, maybe not so good in ray trace titles. You really have to ask whether the extra money is worth it. And I honestly must confess, oh, for goodness sake, stop shooting me. I want to talk to the camera. Anyway, as I was saying, in a title like this, I'm not really feeling like we have much of a compromise. I think the drivers still need a little bit of work. I'm on the pre-release one, and there's a little bit of stutter every now and then, but this is something I'm pretty sure will get ironed out. And wow, okay, I've just turned this down to 1440p, and again, we're seeing a huge increase and more than I was expecting. Now around about 200 FPS, anywhere between probably 165, 200 FPS at 1440p. Again, that's gonna be awesome for pretty much everybody, and this is at ultra settings. So for the good looking games, just turn everything up, enjoy super smooth frame rates. And then I guess for multiplayer stuff, just turn everything down a little bit, max it out, grab your 200 FPS plus. I tested this in Warzone in the previous video that you can find in the top right corner of your screen, and it was also doing very well at 1440p. It's a very, very impressive card. I don't think you can really fault the performance until it comes to ray tracing, as I will now demonstrate, but I would like to say that even on Nvidia's cards, as soon as you turn ray tracing on, everything sort of still goes to pot a little bit. Yes, they have other technologies that you can sort of redeem the FPS back again, but that still doesn't take away from the fact that it's still very, very demanding. And turning that on has introduced more stutter, which is great, and we're getting around about 130 to 140 FPS. So we've lost about 35, 40 FPS. It's not going to matter, you're not going to turn it on in Battlefield, but it's still very interesting to see the results. This is ray traced optical occlusion. Ambient occlusion. Don't know what optical occlusion is. Next, title. And once upon a time, this was my favorite. I played it every day. I was addicted. Not so much anymore. Some Apex Legends. And again, here we're running this at max settings. I believe this new insane volumetric lighting is, well, new. And you can see right at the gate, jumping at the plane, we're getting around about 200 FPS at 4K. 200 FPS at 4K. And touching down, it's even higher. Is this a joke? Am I actually at 4K? It says I'm at 4K. Really? 250 FPS at 4K. I almost don't believe this. Well, I have no excuse not to win this game. I'm gonna reset the resolution. I genuinely don't believe this. Yep, that's right. 225 FPS at 4K in Apex Legends. That is insane. And if this doesn't tell you the story of how strong this GPU is in terms of raw rasterization performance, I don't know what will. I mean, if you want to play Apex Legends, then clearly this and the XT are going to be excellent options. The issue I do have with the XT is that the price is just so close to this and you get quite a lot more performance out of it. I personally think it should have been cheaper. I mean, all of these really should be cheaper. £1,000 for a GPU still isn't cheap. But I mean, if you're looking at this price point, clearly this is way more performance than anybody needs, even if you're wanting to play at like 4K, close to 240 FPS. It's mad. What you're seeing now is 1440p footage, and you can see we're actually properly maxing out this game now. This has an engine cap of 300 FPS, and there's pretty much no problem in reaching that at all. We're just at the limit with around about 96% utilization, so this will drop at certain points in the game. But if you do want to grab one of those fancy 360Hz monitors at 1440p, clearly this is an excellent option for you. I guess you could say this GPU is an Apex legend. No, that was poor even for me. Let us press on and show you the game that AMD probably doesn't want you to see though, some Cyberpunk 2077, or as I call it, worst case scenario. We set this to Raytracing Ultra, return FSR to Ultra quality. If this was an Nvidia card with DLSS 3, you'd be looking at what, like 65, 70, 80 FPS, something like that. But on this AMD card, we're getting not quite so high, around about 41 FPS, which isn't a bad effort compared with previous AMD GPUs, but it's not the best experience, is it? And this very much is the trade-off if you do want to go for an AMD GPU this time around. It's not as bad as it was before, but compared to the new Nvidia cards, it's arguably just as bad, if that kind of makes sense. The performance is not up to snuff. So if we get some future releases that really do take advantage in a way that Cyberpunk does, maybe you want to play The Witcher 3 in this whole new ray tracing mode, then Nvidia cards are going to be the best way to do it. But it just comes down to how much this matters, because to demonstrate, if I now turn ray tracing off again, or actually I'll tune it down to what I would use, which is just the shadows and no lighting. This is how I played the game a couple of years ago, and now our frame rate has increased to around about 70 FPS. So it's not that this card can't ray trace, it's just that it can't have all of these settings turned up to max, which I don't think is a problem for most people, because this feels great, it's very fluid, you've not got to worry about latency or anything, you've got no fancy DLSS 3. I don't think it's an issue anyway, but I know some people are concerned about it. And now you can walk around and the game looks better than it otherwise would, and you're getting around about 60 to 70 FPS. So for me, I think the trade-off is worth it. If I was buying a new GPU now, I don't think there are enough ray trace titles, personally, for me to must have an Nvidia card. But obviously there is so much more to consider, which is why I need to hand you over to the man that can give you all of the information you need. Some say he's not affiliated with Top Gear. Others say he's benchmarkers. Don't sue! Hello everybody, it's me. I'm back with some hardcore information. I mean, look at all of these numbers. We've never had so many. Carla's been busy at work. But what you will clearly see is that when it comes to raw rasterization performance, both of the new AMD cards are actually very impressive. I think there's been a lot of stories out there about how they sort of hyped it up a little bit and now people are a bit disappointed. But if you take all of that away, I would say the numbers are actually very, very impressive at 4K, 1440p. A few things that I do want to point out is that actually the 4080 tends to be a little bit slower than the 7900 XT, other than ray tracing when Nvidia's cards pretty much just trounce everything else. I would also like to point out that there are some differences between DLSS balanced and FSR balanced. It depends on the version and the quality is a little bit up in the air. We've used balance on all of these tests to make them, I guess, more scientific, but I would argue that actually DLSS balance does look better than FSR balance. So take this into consideration, maybe take a little bit of FPS off of the AMD card if you want to get the same level of overall quality that you would with DLSS balanced. But yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So if you seriously are considering these cards, please do bear in mind that not only are they very powerful, but they do require a very high-end CPU and obviously a very large wallet size to actually get hold of them. And I'd also like to point out the fact that all of these have frame rates that most people don't even need. You're going to need a super high-end monitor or TV to probably get the most out of them, especially bearing in mind that we're bottlenecked at 1080p and 1440p. So if you're happy with all of this, you're happy to forgo a little bit of ray tracing performance versus the Nvidia cards, then yes, I would say they are worth buying. But remember that more things are coming, and if Nvidia do drop their prices down, then the value might not be quite so good. It's definitely something to consider. Thank you, benchmarkers. It's a pleasure as always, but I do want to quickly press on to some overclocking before we wrap this up with some conclusions. And at the moment, we're getting around about 119 FPS. This is 1440p windowed mode, but I'm going to go over to our tuning utility, but we're going to go into this utility. We're going to make sure our power is set all the way up to max, and we're going to set the frequency from its default to about 355. But it looks to me as if the performance is basically the same. We're getting one more FPS at the moment. Well, we've hit over 3,000 megahertz now, which is nice, but our performance hasn't really changed. Still not bad, 1440p with some ray tracing, but I think this is the story with a lot of these cards at the moment. You're just not able to really get that much more out of them, other than in very specific use cases or if you're a very experienced overclocker. Well then guys, we find ourselves at a bit of a crossroads. Do you go for AMD or Nvidia? And do you go for a reference design or do you go for something like this Tuf? It's kind of easier than I thought it would be to actually wrap this video up, because I think the 4080, especially this Founders Edition, is a very well-rounded GPU that's just too expensive. I think actually most people would probably rather have this in their rig if the price was the same, because the ray tracing performance of this is so much better, and Nvidia are just a year or two ahead in terms of things like DLSS and ray tracing. This is a better rounded card. But then again, when it comes to what people actually use their gaming PC for, which is mainly playing like multiplayer rasterization based games, then in a lot of titles this is the better GPU. And like Linus was saying in his video, AMD are typically very good when it comes to improving the performance of this over time with the drivers. There's almost potential in this that can come out at a later date. And because this is cheaper, if I had to buy one of these cards right now, I would buy this. I think it's actually quite an easy decision. I don't think £200 more for a 4080 is worth it. But that isn't going to be the question for very long, because for starters, you have things like this Tuf GPU that are just sort of ruining everything, because they don't give you any extra performance really that you need that's particularly noticeable, but they're charging loads more money for the privilege. And all the time that there's a tier above graphics card that's available for a very similar price, I think you'd have to be mad for going for the Tuf edition when you could get a 4080 for the same sort of money. I'm not saying that is going to happen, because pricing, as we know, well, at the moment, I don't know. But if you do find yourself in that situation when you're choosing between a reference 4080 or an aftermarket 7900 XTX, then I would go for the 4080. But assuming the price of these cards is very close to what they're supposed to be, then I think AMD is going to come out on top. But I don't think that's going to be the case for very long, because I think Nvidia are going to have to do something. I originally predicted they'd lower down the price of this to 1049. I have a feeling that they probably won't lower it down quite so much. Maybe they'll look at 1099, and that's when it is going to have to come down to personal preference. And the question really is, how much does ray tracing matter to you? I think that's the only question that's properly worth asking if you have the money to spend on either of these, because of course there are going to be cheaper cards coming in the not too distant future. Do you play Flight Sim and you want DLSS 3.0? Do you play Cyberpunk? Do you want ray tracing, Witcher 3, all of these games that are coming out? Or are you probably like most people where you just play multiplayer titles and actually you'll save the money? In some games you actually get more performance and you'll be very, very happy with Team Red. Let me know down in the comment section below, which way are you going to go? Are you impressed with what AMD has done? Are you disappointed? And obviously the biggest question, have you got your PC Centric mouse mat yet? linked down in the description below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this video. As I say, let me know your thoughts. And as always, if you do want to learn current pricing about anything that's in this rig, including the 7900 XTX, you can find that link down below with my Amazon affiliate links. And while you're down there, why not check out Asus' awesome gaming laptops? The Predator Helios 300 Spatial Labs Edition not only lets you breeze through the latest AAA titles, but with its glasses-free stereoscopic 3D technology, it brings a whole new dimension to the game. Selected Acer laptops even come with a free 1-month pass to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So learn more and grab yours today with the link down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you in the next one.